Welcome to Channel 18 News. I'm Jim Rogers. In a cost-saving step, Hopkins County Jail trustees, assisted by a local contractor, are finishing the sidewalk that will connect the new courtroom to the back of the jail. The cost of the sidewalk was $2,500 instead of $25,000, according to the sheriff's office. This sidewalk will provide easy access to the back of the new courtroom annex being built at the Law Enforcement Center. This will allow inmates to not have to be transported to the courthouse on the square. Now the inmates will be able to walk down the new sidewalk to the courtroom annex. On Thursday, a local contractor agreed to assist one of the trustee crews, showing them how to pour concrete and all the procedures and what it takes to complete the process, according to Sheriff Tatum. Sheriff Tatum said this is just another skill that they may be able to use when they get out of jail and hopefully enter the workforce. This process was paid for by the inmates' commissary fund. A disturbance in the emergency room at Christus Mother Frances Hospital led to the arrest of Lemanuel Rodriguez Vasquez, age 23, of Mount Vernon. When officers arrived at the ER, they found Rodriguez Vasquez had physically assaulted two paramedic staff members with a closed fist. The staff members showed visible bodily injuries. When medically cleared, Rodriguez Vasquez was arrested on 2 counts of assault public servant. He's being held in Hopkins County Jail on a total of $60,000 in bonds. Bradley Adam Dunn, age 30, of Garden City, Michigan, was stopped by a Hopkins County deputy for multiple traffic violations at the 138-mile marker on Interstate 30 Friday morning at approximately 2 a.m. Dunn had in his possessions 195 grams of packaged THC. While speaking with Dunn during the stop, the deputy noted a clear glass cylinder containing a gold liquid believed to be THC. Dunn admitted that the cylinder was a THC cartridge. A possible cause search revealed the large amount of THC. Dunn is in Hopkins County Jail, charged with possession of a controlled substance, penalty group 2, more than 4 grams, but less than 400 grams. That's a felony, too. He's held on a $30,000 bond. The Texas A to F grading system for public schools rated Sulphur Springs Independent School District, along with over 300 other Texas districts, with a grade of B. Superintendent Michael Lamb said the district is pleased to receive the grade, but is unsure of how much it reveals about the district. Lamb noted that the grade signifies the district has done good things, but he stated the district knows what it is attempting to accomplish and where it stands in progress toward that accomplishment. KSST News visited with Lamb Thursday afternoon.
We are pleased to have it. We're not sure it tells us much that we didn't already know. You know, a lot of talk before the grades came out about one grade doesn't necessarily define us, and we believe in that, but it's certainly a part of the big picture, and we like to say, you know, let's just do good school and those things will take care of themselves, and that is a good enough grade that we feel like we've done good things and we get to reap a good benefit from it. So we're pleased to have the B, but it's a little bittersweet from the standpoint of, if we'd have had a D, we weren't going to let that upset us. If we'd have had an A, we weren't going to let that, define us either.
Right. So. When you compare the A, B, and C levels, what do you think makes the difference in those levels?
That's the thing that makes this a crazy kind of system is you look at different things and wonder, and even us comparing to some local schools, you can't help but think naturally that low socioeconomic status plays a part in it for sure. But even when you start doing some comparisons, the correlations aren't as strong as you might think. So then you're left to kind of wonder what makes a difference in one or the other. Now, I will tell you that's one of the big complaints of the system is there's 1,200 data points that bring into one grade. And so when I know, all the things that went into our 84, and I look at a school that say has an 85, and I start trying to mentally compare 1,200 data points, we might have done better here where they didn't, and vice versa. And so it's hard to say what makes one school really better than the other when there's so many different places that are melding into one grade.
You know, in looking at this, they did not count single campus schools and they did not count charter schools. That makes the count a little unfair, does it not?
Probably. I mean, yeah, unfair from the standpoint of it's only unfair if we're all really looking at it from a competitive standpoint. It is, we're surrounded by 3 or 4 when you say single campus schools that are K through 12, and you ask yourself, now why aren't they considered a district to be rated, but they just more or less considered them a campus and didn't rate them with the districts this time. Not sure the logic behind that, but it's funny. They say they didn't, but if you look it up, they gave a number. They just didn't put the letter. So
okay.
You can see a number on everybody and start to compare if you want to, but it's just so hard to. If we're an 84 and somebody's a 74, what's the big difference in us?
Right.
Could be growth, could be sub pops, could be actual passing, could be commit. There's no way to know what the differences are really.
And to help some who don't speak your lingo, sub pops is subpopulations, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
In sitting in school board meetings, I know that not too long ago you guys did kind of a rating of where the school district was, and you were looking at where you are and where you plan to be. Do you see that as more important than this A to F grade system?
Certainly, yeah. I mean, a simple example is our biggest goal right now is we want kids to read on grade level by 3rd grade. Honestly, if we can, and everything you hear in life, and some of it turns out to be folktale, but I've heard my whole life, they build prisons based on 3rd grade reading scores. They look at 3rd grade reading scores and build prisons based on the projection. And come to find out, I don't think that's entirely true, but it's almost true. Whether you go into a prison and assess the situation, 80% of the people there don't read past the 3rd grade level. And so there is a correlation. And that's a place we would much rather put our emphasis is to really make sure we build a strong foundation, make sure people read on grade level, and that's our number one goal. We want to get to where 95% of our kids as 3rd graders read on level. We've seen over and over where what's the problem with our 6th grade scores? They're not reading on grade level. It has nothing to do really with the test or how smart they are. We've got to make sure kids can read and read at the appropriate level.
When you say that 3rd grade level is kind of the base for this, do you feel that when kids hit that 3rd grade level, adding to the next grade level is not as hard from that point on?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably a good way to say it. It just boils down to anything, the foundation. For so long, really, we try in 1st grade to get a kid to read, and 2nd grade to get a kid to read, and sometimes, and it's not to fault of a teacher, but we just, they got to go to the next grade, but they're missing some stuff. And what we got to do is we got to build that foundation, and once the foundation's built, yes, it's all easy to build onto from then.
Yeah, they always talked about the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. Well, we're down to reading and arithmetic.
Sure.
Yeah, the writing thing is kind of passé anymore.
Well, and if writing is still tested, not quite the same, and it's probably one of our weakest areas right now is the writing, just kind of overall, and we know there's work to be done there, and we can make excuses about how kids text and different things, but bottom line, we've got to find some way to improve in that writing aspect, and right now we've really kind of concentrated on reading, and we kind of contend that even when we've had issues in math and science before, usually those issues were due to they couldn't read the problem to do the math or do the science. So we've really put a lot of emphasis on reading. Does that mean we've shortchanged writing? Maybe a little. I hate to think about it, but we definitely have some work to do in writing, and we're going to figure out a way to do it.
Will you be using these scores in any way? I know teachers groups are somewhat opposed to this. Do you feel like that if you tried to use these scores, there would be kind of a reaction against these scores?
It's I said in our convocation. I mean, this is such a fine line. You know, we try to convey the message. We're not all about scores. At the same time, we do use them for certain things. And the best example I can really come up with is, you know, if your scores are bad, we're not going to come in and hatchet you. We're not even saying you're bad. I mean, there's usually factors. We want to use that to look at the factors, look at the reasoning, and figure something out. So that's the reason we're not all about scores. It's not, well, we better make an A or you're all fired. You know, that we don't want to be there.
Right.
But sometimes that's the feeling they get no matter what, teachers. You know, the pressure kind of passes down. But whether the tests are good tests or not, let's just say comparing third graders here to third graders here, if they're performing at a 60% level and they're performing at a 7%, you can use the scores to determine that something's different here.
Right.
It may even be a bad test, but something, you know, so we can use the scores for some things, but we don't want to be all about the scores. And I don't know if that makes sense, really.
Yeah, it does.
It's a hard message to convey because we do use them for certain things, and sometimes they'll say, well, I thought you weren't all about them. We're not using this as a do or die deal, but we are using it as a tool. And what you're hearing across the state, that people that are opposed to the 8F and what have you, school's a big, lots of stuff. And we hate that we got an A, B, or C, D based on one part. But it is one part, so we do got to look at that one part and figure out how to be good at that. But even if we were a D here, doesn't take away from a big picture of a lot of great things we're doing.
Right.
But the D that it is does end up meaning we've got to look at some things in the academic realm and start to see where we can make some improvements.
Socioeconomic issues seem to, from comparing the districts as I compared them, socioeconomic differences do seem to determine certain aspects of the grades.
There's no doubt. There's strong correlations between low socioeconomic statuses of a particular school or district and those that have less. Do they tend to do better? They do. They tend to do better. But on one hand, I mean, if there's any positive out of this system, and I might be one of the only people that believes there's a little bit of positive in that, I just say that's the math person in me, and
Right.
You know, we've had other systems before that we claimed weren't fair.
Right.
And I go back to, this really got intense in 2013 when I believe it was tax at the time. Well, let's just take Sulphur Springs for example. Sulphur Springs, to my knowledge, as a district, never obtained a recognized status, which in that old system, exemplary would have been an A, recognized would have been a B, acceptable would have been a C. And I'm pretty certain Sulphur Springs has always been that acceptable. So you're sitting there as a C, and you don't feel like a C school. And I wasn't here most of that time, but you would contend, well, that's a system that's unfair because it doesn't take our low socioeconomic status into play. It doesn't take into account the fact that we grew a kid from point A to point B, even though they didn't pass. So we complained for years that it wasn't a fair system. This is a pretty fair system and takes all that into play. So now we're a B. And I would contend, when you measure us taking those things into account, that's probably where we should have been all along. With the tools we get, this is what we do. I always use the analogy, how would you say what's a better, how do you compare Dollar Store to Walmart? You know, how do you compare us to Coppell? You know, we're just different animals, and we can be good at what we do, and I think Dollar Store feels good at what they do. Does Dollar Store compete with Walmart? I don't think so, but in some cases I guess they do. It's hard. What's an A? You know, how do you compare schools? It's just, we want to be the best school, but what's that mean? Even if we were an A, are we able to tout we're better than Highland Park, Coppell if we get to A status? I don't know. You know, it gets back to that big picture.
Right.
We've had people not come here because we don't have a swim team. You know,
Right.
it's a matter of what families want for their kids and experiences they want them to have. And if you compare us to the last time I had to have a conversation with a potential doctor in town, they wanted their kid to wrestle and swim. Well, I had to encourage them to look at Rockwall. That's the closest place I know you can do those two things.
Right.
So Different strokes for different folks, depending on what they want.
When schools are not in the business of doing social work and that kind of thing, but are there some things that a school system can do to try to help overcome some of that?
No doubt, and even though we're not in the business of it, we really have to be. We've got to move past some of the stigmas maybe of the past that, well, we're the teachers, we're not going to do this, and this, and we've discovered that we've got to. It goes back to a goofy little thing you learn in college, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And bottom line, kids have needs. And if those needs aren't being met, and they start with just the fundamentals of water and food and that kind of thing, we do a lot of free lunch around here. Why? For that reason.
Right.
They got to feel safe. There's times we've got to we've got to work up that level of needs if we want them to be academically successful.
Speaking of lunches, I did a news story today on the fact that the free lunch is available for students through third grade. They'll all get free lunches during that. Do you think that's going to make a big difference?
It should. The good and the bad. We've always had the opportunity for families that qualify to do it. And what changed a couple of years ago is if a particular school meets if enough kids qualify, there's a threshold, and I don't even know what it is. If you've got this many kids that qualify for free lunch, then the whole campus gets it. And we've started that a couple of years ago. Well, now what's that mean? Because in theory, the kids that weren't qualifying had the money. And we know better than that, really.
Right.
So I think what it did, let's just say that threshold was 60%. Now it brings in the 40% that in theory were able to afford it before, but now they're getting free lunch. The top 20% of that probably doesn't matter, but it just brings in another level that probably deserved it, needed it, and there's just another layer that brings in. I think there's a little bit of, I'm trying to even think, I saw something, so we had it at our third and fourth, which means third, but now we don't have it at fourth, so they got it in third, but they're not going to give it in fourth, which would have been the same as they had it in fourth and weren't going to get it in fifth.
Right.
So there was some point it runs out. Now, I think over time, chances are good that we'll grow into maybe having that everywhere.
Right. When we look at this, we've been talking about the student quite a bit here, and of course, the teachers and their struggle. How do you think? I know you probably haven't had a chance to talk to teachers about this, but how do you think they're going to perceive this grade from their perspective as a teacher?
Well, the grade that's a B that's a district is one thing. Whether it's visible or not, each campus got graded, and so everybody's going to handle it a little different depending on the campus they're on. We talked to them on our opening day of school about not wanting this to define us in any way, and hopefully they take that to heart. Teachers tend to just put pressure on themselves no matter what we say or do. They want to be successful, they want to do good things, and they just kill themselves sometimes trying to be the best, whatever that ends up meaning. So I'm not, teachers fight for scores at times, whether we want them to or not, and there's definitely some things we can look at and say, this is a place we can get better, let's work to get better. But the beautiful thing is, really and truly, we've done a lot of great things in the last few years, and there's a lot of little hot spots that we use scores to say we did make improvement from here to here. I'll just to not isolate any one person. Sometimes I feel like you hurt somebody's feelings if you brag on one, not the other. But what we're looking for, I'll just take science. Science only gets tested in 5th grade and 8th grade, and then high school. For a long time, our science scores, particularly in 5th and 8th, were just not very good. We look at them, we use that to say, man, what are we doing? And 2 years ago, 5th grade science made a drastic change in their program. It was a risk. It was, hey, we think this will work. And science scores shot up 10, if not 20 points that year. Well, that tells you fundamentally, I know when we say we don't believe in scores, we think, well, there's someday some kid might just had a bad day and didn't pass and they should have. And I get all that, and that's true. But when something goes up 10 or 15%, that's what we're looking for, is a fundamental change in practice that we know worked. So now, here it is 2 years in a row, those science scores, well, guess what? In a year where 5th grade really did something different and shot up, 8th grades still weren't very good that year. But they went back to the drawing board, talked amongst themselves, let's try this. And a year later, their scores was shot up about 10 points. Same thing happened in social studies. Those are the kind of things we're looking for. Fundamental change in practice that really ends up can make a difference. We don't want to be 75 one year and celebrate 77 the next.
Right.
That doesn't necessarily show us real change in practice. But we've had these little hot spots several places, a couple of science, social studies, a place in math, and where that's the kind of stuff we're looking for, is where we know we tried and did something that really ended up making a huge difference.
How should the community view this, and what can the community do to help increase what's happening in the school system?
How should they had us believing and scared, in a sense, that these grades were just going to wreck us, from the standpoint of, and it doesn't matter how much we say, if we were a C or a D, that sends a message to some people that, well, my kids aren't in a very good school. And it's just not true, and we've got all these ways we can show you that and prove that if we had enough time to discuss. But so we just want them to, but fortunately, yeah, we've got a decent B hopefully the community can breathe easy that there's not something bad to have to deal with. Does that mean, us being a B, does that make us better than any C or D out there? It really doesn't. So don't. That's the other thing the community can do, is don't read too much into even a good situation. A B, can we work towards an A? You betcha, and we will. We're always going to work to get better, and the community just needs to keep supporting us and keep believing in our kids and believing in our teachers and believing in, like I said, this grade doesn't represent the incredible opportunities our kids have in theater, in band, in choir, in UIL competition, that we do a lot of great things that's not represented in this A or B. Right. And it's like I said, what does that represent? Well, it represents a lot of academics, and I know that's why we're here first and foremost. But for the kids that are at this school building on this house down here with an intention of being a builder one day, that A-B right there really doesn't mean anything for them. And those families can be ecstatic about what they're getting and the things that they're a part of. And as far as I'm concerned, that's an A experience for that avenue of situation. So just don't read too much into it. It's probably the biggest thing. It's a measure of our academics, which our academics is a piece of the big picture of what we do. It's not even really a good measure. Just like I said, there's so many pieces of that puzzle. We got 4 campuses, and I'll tell you, one got the grade they got primarily because of the passing scores they got. Another got the grade they got because of the amount of growth so it's, to say we're a B doesn't tell you anything. It doesn't tell you whether we're good at growing or good at passing or what. It's hard to cram everything into one. It'd be like a kid that takes 7 different classes at the high school, English, and then we give 7 different grades, and English is English. But if I tried to say, well, we're going to take all 7 of those grades and just give you 1 grade, it just doesn't work.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah.
Starting this weekend, there is a revival at Calvary Baptist Church, located in Sulphur Springs at 130 Lee Street. They will meet on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. In fact, 8 services during that 4-day period. Gary Jordan is pastor at Calvary Baptist Church, and evangelist his brother, Larry Jordan. Let's find out more.
I'm the pastor there. Been there just a few months now. My first Sunday was Palm Sunday. And so that was the last Sunday in March. And so just getting my feet good and wet out there. But we're having a great time, having a lot of great services already. And we've had additions of close to 20 now. And since I've been there, and about probably a third of those have been baptisms, and so we've been using the baptistry now that I was actually baptized in over 30 years ago, probably
My
35.
goodness. Well, there is some history there that we want to talk about, but Calvary Baptist Church is at 130 Lee, very easy to find, and a beautiful church. And then Larry is to be evangelist at this revival.
Looking forward to it. We'll start Sunday morning at 11 o'clock and then each evening at 7 o'clock, Sunday through Wednesday, and we'd like for everyone to come out and be a part of the services. I've been doing revival ministry full-time here for about the last 9 years, as I have pastored for many years before that. But the unusual thing about it is Gary and I worked together back in the early 1980s there at Calvary Baptist. I actually came there in 1978 and then called him on as the associate pastor as well as our minister of youth. And I was there 5 years before going on to New Mexico.
So you both have history at Calvary Baptist Church.
Yes, I sure do. Sure do, yeah.
And you say you were baptized there.
I was, yeah. I'd actually had come out of the Methodist Church and had never been scripturally baptized, and so Larry baptized me. In fact, I tell the folks about that experience quite often, or whenever I've baptized here lately. I've told them about how I asked the candidates for baptism to kind of bend their knees, and I said I forgot to do that, and so in turn I hit the bottom of the baptistry, but my feet went up and my bottom went down, but I got baptized.
Okay. Well, if y'all don't mind, just briefly, tell me how you both got started in the ministry. Larry, go ahead first.
I went on a track scholarship to Dallas Baptist University, and strictly to run track, I thought. But God had been dealing with my heart about the ministry. Of course, at first, I thought it was just me thinking of it, and then I thought, well, that's just the devil making me think that, because that's the last thing that I ever thought that I'd ever do. And I was one of these type that when I'd stand up in school, my mind would sit down, my knees would knock, and my voice would quiver, and I was the last candidate for being up before people in ministry. But God desires and delights in working in the miraculous, and he certainly did a miracle in my life. And I've been in the ministry now for going on nearly 40 years now, 49 years.
Okay.
It was October the 30th, 1969, when God called me in the ministry right out there at Dallas Baptist.
And Gary, what is your story?
Well, mine really starts basically with Calvary Baptist Church, because I I'd worked as a youth minister at another church, and then we started visiting Calvary, and their youth minister was getting ready to leave, and so Larry was the pastor, and he asked if I'd pray about coming on and being their associate pastor and youth minister there. And I've talked about that quite often in these days since I've been back at Calvary, talking about over 30 years ago about the things that's happened and the various people that were involved. And it's been fun coming back. It's been kind of like coming back home, which what's really something, the church that I was pastoring before I came to Calvary was Macon Baptist Church. And Larry, that was actually his first church that he pastored. And so that was where I met Gina. That's where she was a member. Okay. She was one of his youth.
So Macon Baptist Church is in
Mount Vernon, right outside of Mount Vernon. Yeah, and we were down there for a couple of years before Calvary come and was looking for me. And so we've just been enjoying the time we've been here at Calvary.
So I know that y'all's families are probably listening this morning. And so are you both from Sulphur Springs?
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
Okay. We're back home.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Gary never left. I've been all over the place. My wife Donna and I have been out in North Carolina and Oklahoma and New Mexico and various places. And of course, doing this revival ministry full time now takes us all over the country. We just recently got back from Alabama and Florida in 2 revival meetings out there. But looking forward to being right here in Sulphur Springs in a revival meeting. A lot of churches nowadays do not have revival meetings, and I think that a lot of churches don't understand how important a revival meeting is, because it's a time of refreshing from the hand of God. And it's not necessarily an evangelistic meeting. Thank God for evangelistic meetings where folks get saved. And we certainly want to see folks get born again, that's for sure. And we will give that opportunity. But a revival meeting is for the child of God to get back to their first love.
Sure.
The Bible says over there in the book of Acts, chapter 3, verse 19, it says, repent therefore and be converted. And that word converted means not only to be broken over your sin, but to be broken from your sin, that your sins may be blotted out. And here's the good part, so that times of refreshing may come from the presence of God. So we're praying that this will be a time of refreshing.
Yes. Amen. Our people are real excited about this revival. There has not been a revival at Calvary in quite some time. And so whenever I come, I told them, I said, well, now we are going to have a revival. And I wanted the first one to be with Larry coming, and he agreed to come, and we're just excited about him coming. It's going to be a great time.
Also, we're going to be having not only evening services, but Gary, you might want to share with them about the noon services, because sometimes people can come at noon and get a free meal and have an opportunity to have a short service during that noon hour.
Yeah, Monday through Wednesday from 12 to 1, we're going to have a service, and it will be basically there in our fellowship hall, and we will provide lunch, and it will be a great meal. I told our ladies, I said, well, just be very simple about it, and then as they've shared with me, they've got really going after it in a big way. So if you want a good meal Monday through Wednesday, 12 to 1, we'll have the meal, and Larry will come and he'll speak. I think we're even going to have a little bit of music. Steve Cups, our minister of music, he's going to be there, and Brenda, his wife, and I think they're going to actually maybe start us out with some music, and then we'll go right on into the service. Of course, we'll be eating and everything.
And we guarantee you that we'll get you back to work before 1 o'clock.
Right.
We will make sure that we get through before 1 o'clock so you can get back to work.
Well, I detect an aura of joy coming off of both of you about this revival in particular. But this one is fairly intensive the way it's structured, and it is a waking up. It feels like to me just reading the flyer.
Yes,
Amen.
absolutely.
Yes. Monday evening, we're going to have an actual kind of emphasis where it's going to be like a Calvary reunion. Since Larry was there back over 30 years ago, and I was there over 30 years ago. A lot of folks, members of Calvary that are actually in other churches now. We just want to have an evening where the people from Calvary, and of course everybody here in town, come and be a part of it. Also, after that service that evening, we're going to have homemade ice cream. And I'm not sure how much homemade ice cream is going to be there, but we're going to have some homemade ice cream, and then the rest will be Bluebell, which is pretty hard to beat.
Can't beat that.
And 'tis the season. So Sunday morning
At 11.
and then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday evenings.
And Sunday night.
And Sunday night, okay.
Sunday morning at 11, Sunday evening at 7. Our normal evening services are at 6, but with the revival, we wanted to be consistent. So at 7 o'clock, Sunday night, Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night.
Okay.
Sometimes people think that, revival meetings, they don't last. Well, a good bath doesn't last, but it sure is a time of refreshing, isn't it? And we need revival meetings from time to time, because it gets us back to our first love for the Lord. You know, the Bible talks about in Revelation chapter 2 about the church of Ephesus. They were doing everything right. They were still doing what they had done 40 years before, as they had started in a blaze of revival. But then 40 years later, Jesus, the ascended Lord now, he speaks to them and he says, that you've doing some really good things, but you have lost your first love. You have got to get back to your first love, and therefore he tells them to repent. And that's what revival is us getting back, the child of God getting back to his first love. And then when a church has genuine revival, not just a meeting, but genuine revival, then that is when lost souls are going to get saved all through the year.
Yes.
But I think that we've gotten away from that in our churches today, and we certainly need to get back to it. The Bible from Old and New Testament talks about these special meetings, revival meetings. And the evangelist still sits right next door to the pastor teacher in the book of Ephesians.
Sure does. And I was sharing with our folks here the other day, also there out of Revelation, and talking about the church at Laodicea. And Laodicea is talking about a church that's neither hot nor cold, but is lukewarm. And so we're sure wanting to get our folks to quit being just lukewarm and be hot for the Lord. And I told them this past Sunday that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a pastor that was hot for the Lord, and I want to see real revival come to our church. And in turn, we want it to go beyond our church. We want it to go to the other churches and this whole community. We'd love to see revival hit Sulphur Springs. We need revival.
And we do have a lot of people that we know that were members back when we were there.
Yes.
Me in the late 70s and early 80s, and you in pretty well in all of the 80s.
Most of the 80s.
And people that came regularly. We had some tremendous revival preachers back in those days and times, like Manly Beasley and Bill Stafford and Ron Dunn, and man, we could go on and on. And the Calvary Singers every year.
Oh, I tell you.
And we had some tremendous meetings. And matter of fact, years ago, we had even 2 morning services. We had so many people coming. Yeah. And so we would love to be able to see all of our old friends come and be with us on that Monday night, especially as we have that reunion night.
Yes.
And that's this coming Monday night, starting this Sunday the 19th and Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. 8 services in just 4 days. That's very ambitious, but I know people are hungry. And what about people who are looking for a church that has a spark?
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do at Calvary is but actually continue a church, but yet a church that wants to really seek the Lord and allow the Holy Spirit to move and let Him have the freedom to move as He would like to move. And it's we're seeing a lot of that happening already, seeing various our prayer meetings on Wednesday night and our Sunday night services are real close to what our Sunday morning services are, and we've been seeing some miracles already happening and just some real exciting times.
Well, just briefly tell us service times, regular service times.
Okay, our regular service times, of course, are 11 o'clock on Sunday morning, 6 o'clock on Sunday evening, and then Wednesday night we have prayer meeting at 6:30, and we just have a tremendous time. But of course, during this revival, be 11 o'clock Sunday morning, 7 o'clock Sunday evening, then Monday at lunch, of course, is 12, and then Monday night at 7, and then same way Tuesday, Wednesday.
And don't forget the ice cream fellowship.
That's
on
right.
Monday night.
Amen. That's right. Come for it. It'll be wonderful.
Right.
And Larry, you as a specific revival evangelist are going to be here at Calvary Baptist Church throughout this.
Yes.
Right.
Specific
Certainly
calling.
looking forward to it. As I said, we go anywhere that the Lord will direct and guide, and whether it be small, large, medium-sized church in town, out of town, wherever. And we're just glad to be able to be here with Gary and Gina, and the good work that they're doing. The last several months they've been here, there has been a real increase in their attendance, and we're grateful.
Thank you both very much for coming in.
Thank you, Nola. Appreciate you for letting
We will
us.
see you at Calvary Baptist Church, 130 Lee Street.
Here's Don Julian with sports.
First, in news, as the end of summer band nears, the Wildcats Marching Band presented its annual exhibition and squad-off cookout at Gerald Prim Stadium Thursday evening, and I talked with Wildcats Band Director Spencer Emmert.
Well, I'm quite impressed. Not only a first song, but a bit of a second one as well.
Absolutely, it was great. We've worked really hard. The kids have done awesome, and we were excited to get to present what we had worked on so far. It was a little bit of a challenge out here in the new environment. We had not yet marched anywhere but our practice field, and we actually have our grid lines painted for our tarp grid on our field, which is going to be part of our show. Just we didn't have it out tonight, so that presented a little bit of a challenge, but it turned out great. The kids recovered on their little whatever the little snafus that may have happened, which is the name of the game in band, and anything else is recovering when there's a little snafu, and the kids did that really well. I thought the playing was awesome, and the turnout was great too.
Well, it I guess speaks volumes for summer band that you're ahead of the game here at this point.
Absolutely. We've got a great, awesome season ahead of us, and we've gotten a great start.
Absolutely. And you're on the Prim Stadium here, and that's something new. It had been on the practice field, but my goodness, the heat out there tonight. What was the temperature, you think?
I think it was probably well over 100 out here as far as the heat index on the field. However, we oftentimes have performances that are that hot, whether it be an early Friday in the season or possibly even a contest. And so kids need to be able to negotiate that. We gave them water breaks even throughout this session multiple times, and as long as we keep them hydrated, they usually can persevere.
I hope you've got those summer band uniforms for the first few games.
Yes, we do. We're actually gonna use our black Tron shirts this year for our summer uniforms and our shorts. So it's gonna be kind of a new twist on an old tradition. So it's gonna be great.
Yeah, first squad off as the director, and my goodness, the ones toting a big load end up winning, the tubas.
That's right. You wouldn't have thought it. That's we call them our heavy metal guys, and so they did great. We were proud of them.
In sports, Mike Metter is a Wildcat assistant coach who coaches quarterbacks. He's in his second season with the Wildcats after 22 years at Lindale, where he was an offensive coordinator and then head coach when Greg Owens came to Sulphur Springs. Coach Metter says he has a great group to work with this year. Included is senior Decorian Young, an experienced signal caller who Coach Metter says played 40 to 50% of the offensive plays last season. Coach Metter says Young has had a great spring, spring game, and a good summer. Coach Metter says he's confident that Young will be a good leader for the offense and the team this season. He says Young is a very good runner, but Coach Metter says right now in fall practice, Young is being encouraged to stay in the pocket, make the reads, and throw the football. He says the Wildcats will unleash Young's running ability in games this fall. Coach Metter says the entire offense is going to have to adapt to situations where Young takes off. Coach Metter says he has two juniors who are competing to be Young's backup quarterback. They are Noe Ponce and Aiden Walker. Coach Metter says the two have good football minds and are competitors. Coach Metter also has a sophomore quarterback running the JV team, and he is Caden Wallace. Coach Metter says the 6'1", 190-pound Wallace has a great arm, is smart, and had a good summer. Coach Metter is also keeping an eye on quarterbacks on the freshman team. And Derek Tyson, a former Lindale coordinator and assistant coach, coaches the receivers for the Wildcats, and he has 11 varsity receivers, and 10 of them are seniors. Seniors include Connor Bergen, Jace Thompson, D.Q. Pitts, Bryce McQueen, Austin Dodd, Damian Day Dugan, Christian Clayton, Landry Tyson, Payson Edwards, and Mason Arnold. Chase Haney is the lone junior, and many of the receivers have played under the Friday night lights. Coach Tyson says it's nice to have all that experience. He notes that Tyson and Dodd have been on the varsity since they were sophomores, and several other of the receivers played on varsity last year. Coach Tyson says his junior Haney has the skill set and the drive to earn him playing time. He says he plans to play all of the receivers. That's good flexibility to have, since most, or if not all, of the receivers also play in the secondary on defense. Coach Tyson says he's never coached a group with a skill set like this current receiver bunch. He says he's just trying to refine them. Coach Tyson says he has high expectations for both receivers and the Wildcats offense as a whole. And he says he has great synergy with offensive coordinator Matt Young and quarterbacks coach Mike Metter. Coach Tyson says it helps receivers to also play on defense. He calls the receivers an intelligent bunch. And Coach Tyson says he expects his group to play multiple receiver positions this season.
Thanks for watching Channel 18 News. Have a great evening.